So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. She also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh, and the desires of the eyes, and pride in possessions, is not from the Father, but is from the world. When Eve considered the tree of knowledge, she saw that it was good for food and pleasant to the eyes. We learned in the previous study that these two attributes correspond to the desires of the flesh and eyes in 1 John 2:16, whether we're talking a donut and coffee in one's favorite mug or our desire to understand quantum physics. We also learned that these two attributes are found in the other trees of the garden which God told Adam he could freely eat from. But Adam don't eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Why not? Because good and evil refers to our behavior, to the range of actions and mannerisms that not only affect ourselves, but those around us as well. As indicated by my insertions, I place pride in possessions in 1 John 2:16 with make one wise in Genesis 3:6. But let's consider this more closely. James said, "If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him." Wisdom, then, is a good thing, for we are encouraged to ask God when we lack it. Job 12:13 tells us that with God are wisdom and might, while Proverbs 3:13 tells us, "Blessed is the one who finds wisdom, and the one who gets understanding." And again, wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore get wisdom, and in all you're getting, get understanding. That's one of my favorite passages. So we must ask, if wisdom is not the problem, and Eve saw that the tree of knowledge was desired to make one wise, then why couldn't she eat of the tree? Well, because the wisdom she desired, coming from the fruit from the tree in the middle of the garden, that is, from the heart, was corrupted by the voice of the serpent, typifying the pride that leads to making the heart of man deceitful above all things. Wisdom in the hands of arrogance always leads to destruction. So, wisdom is certainly not the problem, but the source of it can be. If we lack wisdom, James says to ask God, for He alone can give us that wisdom in humility. Does this mean that we cannot receive knowledge and understanding from our fellow man? Of course not. That's contradictory to the logic that says otherwise. Remember, the tree of knowledge is people, beginning with family and extending outward from there. And all of us gain our knowledge and understanding from those around us. And more often than not, this is how all of us acquire our wisdom from God. So what is meant by not eating the fruit? Fruit comes from spirit. So it behooves us to examine the spirit of the sources of our knowledge and understanding. John wrote, "Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world." Friend, this is true not only in a religious sense, but in a secular sense as well. Test the knowledge, test the understanding, by all means. But more importantly, test the spirit. If the knowledge and understanding is accurate, but rooted in excessive pride, beware, my friend. It's salted with destructive consequences. The heart is deceitful above all things. Your heart, my heart, everyone's heart. This is why our knowledge of good and evil is tainted, impure, lacking sincerity. There's too much self in it. That's why both good and evil are there. I must wonder, is it just coincidence that evil is the word live, spelled backwards? Just thinking out loud. Based on the context of the Genesis presentation, The garden of God consists of many trees, all of which symbolize the desires of the flesh and eyes common to and issuing from every person on this planet. And the tree of knowledge, it abides in all of us as well. Actually, we are the tree of knowledge. Somewhat different in every person, though, due to our culture and upbringing. For this reason, good and evil is often murky and unclear, and so many wrangle in the streets of our cities, crying out for acceptance of things that are simply not good for us. In other studies, I have mentioned that God designed us as creatures of pleasure. The word Eden in Garden of Eden, meaning pleasure. Pleasure fits hand in glove with affection, which is just another way of saying love. John says, God is love. Therefore, having been made in His image, we function out of love as well. Hence the reason the trees of the garden picture these desires. So if this is the case, then what's the problem? Let me put it simply. When our love and desire for the flesh and the things of this world supersede the needs of those around us, we are slipping into a bottomless pit. Not surprisingly, a bottomless pit is pictured in Revelation chapter 9, verses 1 through 11. The bottomless pit represents the carnal mind or inordinate love of the self. Note the following. Sheol and Abaddon are never satisfied, and never satisfied are the eyes or understandings of man. Never satisfied. Doesn't this equate to bottomless? Of course. Also note the word Abaddon. Abaddon means a perishing, rendered destruction, 6 times in the King James Old Testament. Abaddon just happens to be the king over the bottomless pit. Not a literal king, but indicating the pride that goes before destruction, for pride always precedes it. Perhaps the 2 most critical components of wisdom are insight and foresight. Insight is the ability to gain a deep, accurate, and intuitive understanding of a person, thing, or situation. It is about looking inward and underneath the surface of current data to find the root cause. Foresight is the ability to predict or the action of predicting what will happen or be needed in the future. It is about looking forward and outward to anticipate changes before they occur. This seems to point to the idea of prophecy, doesn't it? God alone has perfect insight and foresight. Man, on the other hand, often says, damn the consequences, due to his love of money and his desire to rise above others. Brother and sister, test the spirits. This, my friend, is what is pictured by the serpent. Not a fallen angel strutting around in a literal garden, but the essence of pride rising up between man's mind and man's heart. But remember, the natural man cannot receive the things of the Spirit of God, so it is inevitable that he will fall to this pride in his heart. And so begins our wilderness journey. The seed must fall into the ground to die. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked, says the prophet Jeremiah. Not something we like to hear, right? But it's true nonetheless. But dear brother and sister, that is the purpose of the resurrection process, to purge us of this deceitfulness that leads us astray, that separates us from one another, moving us to think that, for whatever reason we consider acceptable, we're just a little bit better than those folks over there. Jesus settled that argument once and for all when he told the rich man, "Why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone." We often forget that the Lord's staunchest enemies were the religious leaders of his day, the scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees. Perhaps this is why Paul says, the letter kills. It's not the letter or written word that's the problem, but this written word in the hands of carnal man. When carnal man seeks to pass off his wisdom as the wisdom of God, we see the serpent, the essence of pride corrupting the truth. This reality stares us in the face in the form of the countless divisions in Christianity, hiding behind the cloak of, we have it, and others don't. Perhaps most apparent in the horrendous idea of eternal conscious torment, which might well be the most prejudicial ideology to ever infiltrate the Christian ranks. To charge God with such a horrendous character is to justify our own attempts at destroying those who do not agree with our religious beliefs, whether that's literally or otherwise. Think about it. What right do we have to expect anyone to simply agree with what we believe for whatever reason we think they should? Jesus didn't do this. After sharing the parable of the sower with the crowd and then telling his disciples that most in the crowd didn't see or hear, Jesus didn't go back and beg or chastise them for not seeing or hearing. One plants, one waters, but God alone gives the increase. There is a time and season for every purpose. As the old song goes, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse, walk a mile in my shoes.